You know, I've always thought that the inclusion of On Stranger Tides in this game would be similar to what it would be like to have Kingdom of the Crystal Skull included in LEGO Indiana Jones, the original adventures. You know, there's a solid trilogy of movies that most people can admit that, the films are pretty good. And then there's a fourth one that kind of sours the stew, or however that saying goes. Now, don't get me wrong, I strongly prefer what TT Games did with LEGO Pirates of the Caribbean to what they did with LEGO Indiana Jones. Like, imagine if they made a LEGO Pirates of the Caribbean, the original exploits of Captain Jack Sparrow, which only covers the original 3 films, and then follow it up with LEGO Pirates of the Caribbean 2, the exploits of Captain Jack Sparrow continues, where half the game covers the inferior 4th movie while cramming the first 3 movies again in the second half. And no, I'm not that great at naming things, okay? The point is, I feel like 2 very similar franchises in the sense of how the movies got released got 2 totally different treatments by TT Games when it came to the adaptation of the material. And to extend the comparison, not that it matters, but both Indiana Jones and Pirates of the Caribbean later get a 5th installment that was after the release of their LEGO games. So there's that. I mean, okay, the 5th Pirates of the Caribbean movie sucks, and on principle I can't watch the 5th Indiana Jones movie. So I guess the lesson to be learned is LEGO Indiana Jones 2 should be deleted from existence, and TT Games should release retroactive DLC to the original adventures containing 6 levels of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. A man can dream. Oh, you think I'm gonna let you have a break from the Brethren Court? How about a whole slew of the ones that don't hold any bearing to the plot? Because that's what's happening. Eduardo Villanueva is the next on the chopping block with a shorter and easier to pronounce name than the last dude we just covered. In the Brethren Court level, you help this guy out by saving his life. You would find the handle that is needed to pull up Eduardo here from this dangling boat that he somehow found himself on. And with that kind of behavior on the Brethren Court land, it makes you wonder how this guy even got enough reputation to become a pirate lord of the Adriatic Sea, which was his designated sea, by the way. Yeah, these guys get their own seas to preside over. Angria's was the Indian Ocean, which is infinitely larger than Villanueva's Adriatic. I wonder, it begs the question, how did they decide the boundaries for which these pirate lords rule over? Because that is totally unfair on Villanueva's part. Maybe Angria has a bigger fleet to be able to maintain his region, or Villanueva is just as good with a smaller crew. I'm not paid enough to find out, but I could make the rules if you guys want. But as for this game, Eduardo Villanueva also just has the sword ability, similar to Angria, of course. Next up in the Brethren Court Marathon is Amon the Corsair, Pirate Lord of the Black Sea. The Black Sea is about 3 times the size of the Adriatic, but still pathetic in size compared to the Indian Ocean. You think when the Brethren Court were mapping out territory, they told Angria they can just have the Indian Ocean as like an afterthought and just didn't realize how huge of a territory that actually is? Amon's task that you must complete for him is exceptionally basic compared to the others, and it's probably because it's the one right next to the spawn point for the level. You just have to use the sword levers to release bricks that will construct a statue of Amon the Corsair. Way to feed an ego, but it gets the objective done. As always, the only ability of this Brethren Court member is just his trusty sword, but aside from that, there's really not much to say at all. Not that I expected these Brethren Court people to be fully fleshed out in this movie, but the whole concept of the Brethren Court seems a bit haphazardly put together. I get that all the pirates coming together was the only thing that could stop a deadly duo of Davy Jones and the entire British Navy, but instilling order among this group of people who swear to a life without order just seems a bit silly to me. This guy here, Gentleman Jocard, is the pirate lord of the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean is 13 million square miles larger than the Indian Ocean, so this Gentleman Jocard guy is definitely holding some status. Maybe that's why he's making everyone call him Gentleman? Or he could actually be a gentleman, who's to say? I mean, well, he's a pirate, so Who knows? Really, I don't. And again, I'm not going to read those children's novels, but I did mosey on over to the wiki to find out that not only was Gentleman Jocard a crewmate on the Black Pearl, Jack Sparrow's ship, but he was also imprisoned in Davy Jones' locker, both of which happened before the events of the Brethren Court meeting, which... Huh? Barbosa and company barely managed to get to Davy Jones' locker with that magic map. How could Gentleman Jocard do it without it? Even the wiki doesn't know. For Gentleman Jocard's task in the Brethren Court level, you must point a cannon at a chest and blow it up. Alternatively, in free play, you can bypass the cannon with someone with the explosive ability. And if you're a regular watcher of the channel, you'll know what I mean by that. But if you're new, you're going to have to wait till part 6. Sorry.
Hey, this is Editor Me from the editor room, or my room, whatever. I forgot to say his only ability is sword. Not that I think you guys are idiots. You guys probably can judge that from what I've been saying the past few seconds, but I got to cover all my bases. So, Gentleman Jocard's only ability is sword. Yep.
Okay, listen, guys, we're almost done with the Brethren Court for now. I believe there's one more after this. Yeah, and then we'll get a break. So, just take a breath. Let's get through this, okay? Captain Cheval, this guy's outfit is definitely the best out of the Brethren Court bunch, and his only ability, which is, of course, the sword, uses his cane as the sword instead of an actual sword, and I love that. And you'll come to see that soon enough with more characters that substitute swords with similar shaped objects for the sword ability. Captain Cheval is the pirate lord of the Mediterranean, which causes even more confusion with Villanueva's jurisdiction. For those who don't know, the Adriatic Sea is a part of the Mediterranean Sea. So does Villanueva answer to Cheval? That would be funny if true. And now it's my new headcanon. Yep, Villanueva is Cheval's employee now. You can't convince me otherwise. You have to complete one of those rotate the box to get the ball out type of puzzle for Cheval, which we saw 3 levels prior in the Singapore level on a larger scale. And for someone who binged the entirety of the 4 campaigns in this game to prepare for this series, it just seems a little bit repetitive. Sao Fang played a pretty big role in At World's End. He was also one of the pirate lords before his untimely end to the Flying Dutchman in the movie of his origin, At World's End, with Elizabeth Swann promptly replacing him. I mean, the whole reason the Caribbean crew went to Singapore, which was a level in this game, was to steal Sao Fang's magic map so that they can go to Davy Jones' locker. You know, the one that you see in the segment transitions for each character in these videos? Yeah, that one. That's the map. Sao Fang didn't even survive 1 movie before kicking the bucket, but to be fair, the death count in At World's End was pretty substantial since it was the end of a trilogy. A similar situation happened with the final Harry Potter installment. They probably are never coming back anyway, so why not kill them, you know? But I digress. Sao Fang, despite having a pretty big role in At World's End, doesn't really hold up in this game in terms of abilities. Just like all other pirate lords before now, Sao Fang only possesses the sword ability. Good for him that he has a sword, considering this is a pirate game, but come on, my guy. Do something else. Who knew that not being disgraced would bump you up into the next part of the series? Yeah, I went over Disgraced Norrington a while back, and while nothing has changed here ability-wise, I have to bump him up because his status is reinstated. Norrington's situation is unique in this game. Of course, Norrington was in the first 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies and plays a pretty substantial role. However, in this game, you play the Disgraced Norrington first in the Dead Man's Chest campaign. Then you later unlock this Norrington, the standard one, in the campaign after, in the aptly named Norrington's Choice level. This poses a sticky situation for the movie representation counter I'm doing at the end of every video. Norrington originated in the first Pirates movie, but you unlock him in the 3rd movie's campaign in this game. So do I give the point to Curse of the Black Pearl or At World's End? I'm going to make a judgment call, and I'm going to give the point to Curse of the Black Pearl.
Wow.
But to compensate for this, 2 other characters that you play in the Norrington's Choice level will both count for At World's End. even though those two guys also originated in the first movie. So I guess that's how it goes. I'm not going to say their names, obviously, until we officially cover them. But if you're one of those people that waits for the supercut and is watching this now, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. But in any case, James Norrington, of course, only has the sword ability, and his lack of abilities is why I've been rambling about some unnecessary thing. And let's just move on. Governor Weatherby Swann is one of those important characters that almost stays out of the action entirely. In case you haven't seen the films or you don't recognize the last name, Governor Swann is the father of Elizabeth Swann, the female lead. He is the governor of Port Royal and, like James Norrington and Sao Fang before him, dies in the third movie. At least Elizabeth got to see him one last time as he passed on while they were in that limbo area, which must have been a tough situation. I couldn't really imagine myself. Anyway, Governor Weatherby Swann is just like all the characters in this part so far, in that he has the sword ability, and that's it. However, he stands out since he wields a candle in the place of a sword. The candle still operates the same as a sword, but it's more quirky and fun. Listen. I have to find ways to differentiate these characters so that I can rank them. Okay? And what am I supposed to do when they function exactly the same? Okay? The fact that he has a candle instead of a lame old sword is good enough of a reason for me. This is a funny addition to the roster for me, mostly because I'm surprised this guy can actually walk on his 2 feet for more than 10 seconds. King George appeared in On Stranger Tides, and Jack Sparrow met him briefly before doing one of those signature escape scenes. The king was played by the legendary Richard Griffiths, who was Uncle Vernon in the Harry Potter movies. I don't know how accurate his betrayal was to the actual King George during his reign, but being a disgusting slob seems like something that is plausible for men born with deifying privilege. I'm shocked King George has any abilities at all in this game, but he indeed does. It's the exact same situation as Governor Swann, but it's something nonetheless. King George also wields a candle that functions as a sword, and it's also his only ability, not surprisingly. I only really ranked King George over Governor Swann, despite the governor being much more important to the plot of Pirates of the Caribbean, because the king literally outranks a governor. The king outranks everybody. That's the point. Now here's one of the main villain characters. He was the guy who mutinied Captain Sparrow to gain control of the Black Pearl, but his relations with the main protagonists got better as the franchise went on. I mean, spoilers, he sacrifices himself for his daughter in the last one, so there's that.
Who am I to you? Treasure.
But in this game, I kind of feel like Barbosa got shafted. I mean, he's a huge character in the movies, and his Lego counterpart in this game is just lacking. He only has the sword ability, which doesn't seem unusual at first glance. However, I'm going to try to explain something without spoiling the list, but there's a certain ability in this game that the crew of the Black Pearl have because of the Aztec curse that was cast on them prior to the first film. Since the curse was lifted, technically, these characters shouldn't have that ability anymore. But since you don't see them at any point after the first film, the developers just had those crew members retain that ability, even though the curse was lifted. However, Barbosa, also being subjected to the curse that was since lifted, had that specific ability revoked since he was a playable character in a level after the events of the first film, that level being the Singapore level in At World's End. If Barbosa wasn't a playable character at all in the story, Barbosa probably would have had that ability, but he was in a level after the first film, so he doesn't have that ability. It'll make more sense eventually. Guess what? Barbosa was the last character to have only the sword ability and nothing else. I felt bad for how Barbosa got cheated in this game, so he was deemed the best sword-only character guy, but now we're heading into the ranged-only ability people. Tai Huang, one of Sao Fang's right-hand men, has a gun. And that's really all that can be said about him in this game. He's a gun guy. You see a target, Tai Huang can take care of it. I know I've said the sword ability is so important in this game and that it's needed in levels way more than ranged weaponry is. So why are the ranged only characters ranked higher than the sword only characters? Well, as you'll come to see, as we get higher in the list, swords will become increasingly common, to the point that you'd never use one of those sword only characters that I've gone over unless you personally like one of them for some reason. Otherwise, if you need the sword ability, you'll just use a character that has a sword plus other abilities. Ranged weapons, though, they're not nearly as common, so there's a good chance you'll switch to someone like Tai Huang to shoot it down a target or two. Alright everyone, it's time for that end of episode character count where I count the character's origin movie and give points to which movie has the most. And wouldn't you know it, that huge stretch of Brethren Court people make it so at Worlds End blows the others out of the water. Or tides? Never mind, that was a stupid pun. It's not even a pun, I just tried to force it, I don't know.